She didn't remember falling. She only remembered running. Branches slashed against her skin, shadows shifted around her, and every breath came like a knife inside her ribs. Her legs finally gave out when her body refused to obey any further, and she collapsed onto the cold dirt, face first, too exhausted to even lift her head. For a moment she lay there in silence, trembling against the earth, her thin hands trying to find something, anything, to hold on to. Nothing answered. No voice called her name. No signal pinged from the ship that had abandoned her. The quiet didn't comfort her, it confirmed what she already feared. She had truly been left to die. Her people didn't rescue the wounded. They didn't search for stragglers. Survival was proof of strength, and collapse was proof you didn't deserve to continue. She had grown up understanding this, trained into it since childhood, yet the reality of being discarded felt far different from the doctrine. Her body throbbed with pain, but her chest hurt worse. She tried to push herself up, but her arms buckled and she crumpled again, dirt filling her mouth. She didn't even have the strength to spit it out. She thought that was how her story would end, face down on an unfamiliar world, alone, nameless, forgotten. She had no reason to expect anything else. Her species didn't believe in mercy. And humans, she'd only heard rumors. Primitive, rugged, reckless, dangerous. She prayed she wouldn't encounter one before she died, because anything was better than being found by a creature known for unpredictability. But fate had never cared for her preferences. A distant crunch of footsteps reached her just as she was fading into unconsciousness. Slow, heavy, careful. Not the stride of one of her own. She tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond. Panic rose inside her, but it was weak, watery. She couldn't even summon the energy to be afraid properly. She felt a shadow fall over her. She felt warmth, actual warmth, near her cheek. Not mechanical. Not metallic. A living presence. A voice broke through the haze. Deep, human, roughened by wind and work. He spoke softly, not wanting to startle her, but the words blurred together for her. She didn't understand human languages yet, not fully, but she understood tone. And this one wasn't a threat. It wasn't dominance. It wasn't disgust. It was concern. That confused her more than anything. Why would a human care about a collapsed stranger? Why would anyone? When he crouched beside her, she felt the ground shift under his weight. A hand, large, calloused, warm, hovered near her shoulder before gently settling against her back. Her instincts screamed to pull away, but she couldn't move. He realized that and spoke to her again, slow and deliberate, as if giving her permission to refuse. She didn't understand the words, but her trembling slowed. Something about the steadiness of his presence made the fear loosen its grip. Then, without ceremony, he lifted her. She would later realize humans are far stronger than they look, but in that moment, she only recognized the shocking ease with which he lifted her off the ground. Not like she was a burden. Not like she was a dying thing to discard. He lifted her like she mattered. Like she was something worth saving. She didn't know how to process that. Her people lifted tools and weapons with care, but never their wounded. His arms braced her weight, one under her legs, one across her back. She felt her head roll against his chest, her cheek brushing coarse fabric in steady warmth. She tried to whisper something, maybe to tell him to leave her, that she wasn't worth the effort, but only a tiny rasp escaped. He responded with a quiet shushing sound, not unkind, just calming. As he carried her through the forest, she drifted in and out of awareness. Every few moments she felt his heartbeat against her ear, slow and unwavering. Each time she stirred, he adjusted his hold, ensuring her injuries weren't worsened. She didn't understand why he bothered. Her people declared compassion a flaw. Even the idea of tending to another's wounds was taboo unless the person had proven themselves indispensable. She had never been indispensable. Her eyes cracked open long enough to see his face once. A rough-edged human with wind-tangled hair and tired but determined eyes. Dirt smudged his skin. His clothes were patched and worn. Nothing about him looked like a warrior or a noble figure. Just a simple human. And maybe that was what stunned her most. A simple human had chosen to carry her when her own elite-trained tribe had left her behind. He reached a small shelter, a cabin or outpost, and nudged the door open with his shoulder. The interior was dim, lit only by faint rays slipping through wooden seams. He laid her gently onto a soft surface, maybe a cot or bed, and his movements never hurried. He examined her injuries with cautious, deliberate hands, as if afraid of hurting her more. Humans, she realized, touched with such emotion. Every gesture carried meaning. Every movement conveyed intention. She wasn't used to that. He found water, raising her head carefully to help her drink. It burned going down, but her body welcomed it. He tore cloth into strips and cleaned her wounds, flinching slightly each time she winced. He worked with a strange mix of care and grit, like someone who had patched up injuries before, not because he was trained but because life had forced him to learn. She whispered a single word in her native language, "Why?" He didn't understand the word, but he understood the question. He paused, met her fading gaze and said something soft in his own tongue. His tone held no ego, no arrogance. Just quiet conviction. Even without the language she understood the meaning, because you needed help. That's enough. And that baffled her more deeply than anything her tribe had ever taught. Her breathing slowed as exhaustion claimed her again. Her body finally relaxed under the first genuine safety she'd ever felt. The human checked her temperature, adjusting blankets around her. He stayed nearby, not looming, not invading, just present, protective in a way utterly foreign to her upbringing. As darkness wrapped around her mind again, she processed one final thought, fragile, new, and astonishing. Humans don't leave the fallen behind. They lift them. They carry them. They save them. And as she drifted into unconsciousness, she realized something else, something that would change everything that came after. If this human believed she mattered, maybe she did. Her first clear breath came hours later, when the trembling in her limbs finally eased and the fog in her vision thinned. The scent of wood, smoke, and something warm drifted around her as she blinked herself awake. The ceiling above her was rough-hewn timber, uneven but sturdy, nothing like the cold alloy ceiling she was raised beneath. It felt impossibly still here, like the air itself wasn't afraid of anything. Her body responded slowly, muscles stiff but no longer screaming in agony. For the first time since her collapse, she wasn't fighting her own breath. She shifted slightly and pain sparked through her ribs, but before she could stifle the involuntary sound, the door creaked. The human stepped in, hands dusty, clothes marked with small streaks of mud from whatever task he had been doing outside. He paused when he saw she was awake, his expression softening with something she didn't know how to read. Humans had so many expressions, so many small movements in their faces. To her people, emotion was hidden, suppressed, a weakness. To humans, it was communication. He approached with careful steps, not looming but not timid either. He said something in his language, warm, low. She couldn't translate it, but she could tell it wasn't a command. He checked her temperature with the back of his hand, the gesture so unexpectedly gentle she flinched. He didn't jerk away or scold her. He simply waited until she relaxed. He brought her water first, helping her sit just enough to drink. His arm supported her back, steady and patient. The water was cool and calming, but she drank in small sips, ashamed of how weak she felt. She had been trained to mask vulnerability, to hide exhaustion, to never show need. But his presence made that impossible. He saw everything, her trembling, her hesitancy, her confusion, and he didn't judge it. When she finished, he moved to a small hearth where he'd been heating food. She watched him work, movements efficient, practiced in a way that suggested he lived alone. The food's aroma was foreign, simple, earthy. When he brought it to her, offering the bowl, she hesitated. Eating food from another species was dangerous for most aliens. Enzymes, toxins, compatibility issues. But he seemed to anticipate that. Before she could protest, he lifted a small sample to his own mouth and ate it to show it was safe. The gesture left her stunned. He risked poisoning himself just to reassure her. Her fingers curled around the bowl and she accepted a small bite. The warmth spread through her tired body like a slow sunrise. Her eyes stung unexpectedly, the unfamiliar sensation of gratitude mixing with a lifetime of conditioning that told her she shouldn't accept help at all. She forced herself to breathe steadily, not wanting him to think she was distressed. Yet he watched her with a quiet attentiveness that made hiding anything impossible. He tried speaking again, pointing to himself and saying his name, Nathan. She repeated it, the syllables rough in her throat, but he smiled anyway. He pointed to her next, waiting for her to share her name. She hesitated. Names were sacred among her people, shared only in trust. But hadn't he already earned that? He had lifted her from death, protected her, fed her, treated her wounds with more care than her own kind ever had. She told him her name, Lyra. Nathan repeated it gently, getting the pronunciation as close as he could. Something in her chest tightened when she heard it from a human voice. There was no title attached, no rank, no implied hierarchy. Just her name, acknowledged like it mattered. As the day moved on, she tried to sit up on her own. Her legs protested, her muscles trembling violently, but she forced them to obey. Instinct told her to hide her weakness, to awkwardly pretend she needed nothing. Nathan didn't push her, but the moment she swayed, he moved to steady her. She expected irritation, a scolding, a demand that she stay still. Instead, he guided her back to the cot with a murmured reassurance. It was unfamiliar, unnervingly gentle, and it cracked something inside her that had been hardened for years. She wished she could explain in human language why she kept trying. Her species marked worth by resilience. If you didn't stand on your own, you weren't worth lifting. She wasn't ready to believe she deserved to rest. But Nathan seemed to understand anyway. He didn't tell her to stop pushing herself. He simply stayed close enough that she wouldn't fall. As she regained some strength, she began observing him more closely. Humans were puzzling. Everything they did held layers of meaning. They worked with their hands in ways her people never did. They built, repaired, adjusted, experimented. She watched him mend a tool handle, check the perimeter of the cabin, gather firewood, all with a stubborn focus she couldn't look away from. He didn't move like a soldier or a technician. He moved like someone who had learned to survive because there was no other option. That resilience fascinated her. Her species valued strength, but only the kind that came from birthright or biological advantage. Humans valued effort, determination, choice. It was a strange kind of power. Throughout the day, Nathan asked her simple gestures and words, slow, repeated, patient, teaching her fundamental human communication. He wasn't frustrated by her unfamiliarity. If anything, he seemed glad she tried. When she mispronounced something, he didn't laugh. He corrected her gently. When she didn't understand a gesture, he repeated it without annoyance. Slowly, she allowed herself to relax. Her breathing evened out. The constant alertness in her posture faded. She felt safe. And the realization terrified her. Safety was something her kind didn't believe in. Everything was temporary, conditional, earned and re-earned by obedience. But here, in this small carved-out space in the wilderness, a human had given her safety with no conditions at all. Yet even as calm settled over her, her instincts whispered warnings. Her tribe would come looking, not to rescue but to punish. Their trackers could detect life forms. They would eventually find her. And they would not tolerate a human interfering. She tried to explain this to Nathan using broken words and gestures, showing fear, showing urgency. Instead of reacting with dread, he simply nodded once, firm and calm, as if accepting a burden without hesitation. He picked up a small knife and checked its edge. He checked the cabin's locks. He prepared in quiet, steady ways. She realized with a sinking emotion she had never named, humans didn't retreat from danger. They prepared to face it. He wasn't afraid of them. Not because he believed he could overpower them, but because he had already made a choice. He had chosen to protect her. No one had ever chosen her. Night came slowly, settling with a hush over the forest. Nathan lit a lantern and sat nearby while she rested, not hovering, not demanding conversation, simply ensuring she wasn't alone. She studied him in the dim light, the worn clothes, the calloused hands, the calm eyes, and understood the unspoken truth. He hadn't saved her out of obligation. He saved her because that's what humans do. They see someone fall. They pick them up. They give them value even when the world insists they have none. And as she drifted into sleep again, she felt the first fragile spark of something her species tried to stamp out long ago: hope. Her chest tightened as she recalled the thought that had struck her when he first lifted her. If he believed she mattered, perhaps she truly did. Her species had never offered that affirmation, had never lifted her beyond her perceived utility. Strength had been measured in obedience, loyalty had been conditional, kindness had been transactional. Nathan's actions disrupted all she had been taught. His decisions were not bound by hierarchy, custom, or survival calculus. They were human. They were simple and complex in the same moment, and they challenged the very foundation of her understanding. She had been unworthy by every standard she had known, yet she was treated as valuable. Fear returned briefly as a shadow on her consciousness. Her people were still out there. They would seek her. They would not be swayed by her survival or the human's intervention. Punishment for defiance was not negotiable. Survival against protocol was not tolerated. She imagined the discipline, the weapons, the unflinching logic of her tribe as they hunted her across the terrain. And yet, the human remained beside her, unaffected by the mere thought of facing them. The calm defiance radiating from him was unlike anything she had encountered. Her fear, once unrelenting, began to temper with recognition. He would not abandon her. He could not be intimidated. He would meet threat with calculated resistance, persistence with strategy, strength with adaptability. This human, in his singular form, opposed an entire system built to eradicate weakness. And he would succeed. She found herself speaking more freely, recounting experiences she had never shared, memories of trials endured, lessons forced upon her, and moments of unacknowledged pain. Nathan did not interrupt, did not patronize, did not minimize her story. He responded only when necessary with measured phrases or gestures, confirming understanding without intrusion. The realization struck her with increasing intensity. Humans were allies in the truest sense. They did not demand perfection. They did not weigh value by achievement or rank. They measured it by presence, by will, by moral courage. And he had granted her all of this without pretense or expectation. Lyra's chest tightened again, but this time with something closer to awe than fear. She allowed herself a small, tentative question. Why? Why did he help her when no one else would? Why had he lifted her when her own species left her to the elements? His answer was simple, almost incomprehensible in its clarity, because it was right. No strategy, no politics, no obligation, only choice. She considered the concept, turning it over in her mind, feeling the strangeness and clarity in equal measure. Her species valued control, prediction, and dominance. Humans valued the act itself, the intention, the recognition of another life as inherently meaningful. For the first time, she understood a philosophy without fear, without hierarchy, without selfishness, the moral imperative of the human heart. Hours passed in quiet observation. Nathan moved through tasks, repairing, preparing, checking, arranging, each action deliberate yet fluid. Lyra's mind traced every gesture, every motion, every breath. He was not extraordinary in the way her people measured excellence, yet his presence radiated competence, patience, and purpose. She began to understand why humans endured despite limitations, why they thrived in worlds hostile to their survival, why they were capable of defying logic, expectation, and authority. He had saved her life. He had restored her hope. And he had done it simply because he chose to. That choice, she realized, was more powerful than any weapon, any genetic advantage, any cultural doctrine she had ever known. Her eyelids grew heavy again, but this time she surrendered willingly. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to rest fully, not because she was forced, not because she was immobilized, but because someone, one human, had created a space where rest was possible, safety tangible, and existence itself validated. As consciousness faded, one thought lingered. If humans could act with such uncompromising morality, such deliberate courage, and such unwavering loyalty, then perhaps she could survive. Perhaps even she could begin to live. Her chest tightened as she recalled the thought that had struck her when he first lifted her. If he believed she mattered, perhaps she truly did. Her species had never offered that affirmation, had never lifted her beyond her perceived utility. Strength had been measured in obedience. Loyalty had been conditional. Kindness had been transactional. Nathan's actions disrupted all she had been taught. His decisions were not bound by hierarchy, custom, or survival calculus. They were human. They were simple and complex in the same moment, and they challenged the very foundation of her understanding. She had been unworthy by every standard she had known, yet she was treated as valuable. Fear returned briefly as a shadow on her consciousness. Her people were still out there. They would seek her. They would not be swayed by her survival or the human's intervention. Punishment for defiance was not negotiable. Survival against protocol was not tolerated. She imagined the discipline, the weapons, the unflinching logic of her tribe as they hunted her across the terrain. And yet, the human remained beside her, unaffected by the mere thought of facing them. The calm defiance radiating from him was unlike anything she had encountered. Her fear, once unrelenting, began to temper with recognition. He would not abandon her. He could not be intimidated. He would meet threat with calculated resistance, persistence with strategy, strength with adaptability. This human, in his singular form, opposed an entire system built to eradicate weakness. And he would succeed. She found herself speaking more freely, recounting experiences she had never shared, memories of trials endured, lessons forced upon her, and moments of unacknowledged pain. Nathan did not interrupt, did not patronize, did not minimize her story. He responded only when necessary with measured phrases or gestures, confirming understanding without intrusion. The realization struck her with increasing intensity. Humans were allies in the truest sense. They did not demand perfection. They did not weigh value by achievement or rank. They measured it by presence, by will, by moral courage. And he had granted her all of this without pretense or expectation. Lyra's chest tightened again, but this time with something closer to awe than fear. She allowed herself a small, tentative question. Why? Why did he help her when no one else would? Why had he lifted her when her own species left her to the elements? His answer was simple, almost incomprehensible in its clarity, because it was right. No strategy, no politics, no obligation, only choice. She considered the concept, turning it over in her mind, feeling the strangeness and clarity in equal measure. Her species valued control, prediction, and dominance. Humans valued the act itself, the intention, the recognition of another life as inherently meaningful. For the first time, she understood a philosophy without fear, without hierarchy, without selfishness, the moral imperative of the human heart. Hours passed in quiet observation. Nathan moved through tasks, repairing, preparing, checking, arranging, each action deliberate yet fluid. Lyra's mind traced every gesture, every motion, every breath. He was not extraordinary in the way her people measured excellence, yet his presence radiated competence, patience, and purpose. She began to understand why humans endured despite limitations, why they thrived in worlds hostile to their survival, why they were capable of defying logic, expectation, and authority. He had saved her life. He had restored her hope. And he had done it simply because he chose to. That choice, she realized, was more powerful than any weapon, any genetic advantage, any cultural doctrine she had ever known. Her eyelids grew heavy again, but this time she surrendered willingly. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to rest fully, not because she was forced, not because she was immobilized, but because someone, one human, had created a space where rest was possible, safety tangible, and existence itself validated. As consciousness faded, one thought lingered. If humans could act with such uncompromising morality, such deliberate courage, and such unwavering loyalty, then perhaps she could survive. Perhaps even she could begin to live. The stillness of the forest was deceptive. Lyra sensed it first, a subtle tension in the air, a vibration beneath the ground that made her stomach knot. She had survived the wilderness, survived her own weakness, and survived her people's indifference, but this was different. Something was coming. Nathan noticed it too, the shift in atmosphere, the rigid tightening of muscles, the quiet alertness in his posture. Humans didn't always announce their awareness, but they felt danger in ways that surpassed sight or sound. He didn't speak immediately. He simply adjusted his stance, moving in a way that put himself between her and whatever threat approached. Lyra's heart beat faster, not from fear of being caught, but from recognition. Humans do not flee. Humans stand. Humans face the impossible without hesitation. Her instincts screamed warnings, fragments of memory from her people's pursuit drills, tactics designed to teach obedience, compliance, and the inevitability of failure if one disobeyed. The creatures that emerged from the tree line confirmed every fear she had tried to suppress. Her tribe, the elite hunters, the enforcers of law and punishment, had arrived. Their armor glinted even in the dim light, weapons raised, postures rigid and confident. Their leader's gaze fixed on her, a mixture of disgust and disbelief. She was alive. She had survived. Worse, she had survived with a human. A primitive human who dared interfere with their methods, their authority, their rules. Her chest tightened. She wanted to flee instinctively, to obey the lesson she had been taught her entire life. Escape is futile, submission is survival. Yet she didn't move. Nathan's calm presence rooted her. Humans protect. Humans resist. Humans defy even when outmatched. He had proven it before and he would prove it again. The leader stepped forward, voice sharp and cold, demanding her return. He accused her of betrayal, of abandoning her place, of contaminating a human with her defiance. Lyra met the words with silence, but her eyes flicked to Nathan. He stood firm, body squared, not responding with words, but with the unspoken declaration that he would not let them harm her. They expected fear, obedience, and hesitation. They received none. The moment hung taut, every second stretching longer than her body could tolerate. Yet she did not move. She realized in that moment that standing beside him was safer than running alone, that the human's choice to protect her outweighed her instincts drilled into her since childhood. Her people underestimated the human. They saw a weaker species, a creature with no biological enhancements, no combat training comparable to their own, and yet they had forgotten the most dangerous trait humans possess: resolve. Nathan did not flinch. He did not gesture, shout, or threaten unnecessarily. He only prepared, subtly shifting weight, ensuring he could react without provoking immediate aggression. The aliens attempted intimidation, raised weapons, vocal threats, calculated gestures meant to instill fear. Yet every attempt met with human composure. The imbalance in physical power was undeniable, yet he compensated with observation, anticipation, and strategic patience. Lyra's astonishment grew. Humans do not submit simply because rules or force dictate. Humans adapt, they improvise, and above all, they refuse to surrender life or principle without struggle. She found herself stepping slightly forward, involuntarily drawn to his example. Her species trained obedience, conformity, and withdrawal as instinct. Here, standing with a human who defied superior numbers and technology, she felt the power of choice. Nathan's calm presence was not passive, it was active, deliberate, and contagious. She saw the alien leader's eyes narrow, recognizing the anomaly, sensing the human's unwavering moral code. They expected her to panic, to beg, to comply. She had survived every hardship expecting nothing, yet the human beside her created a space where hope was tangible. Hope, she realized, was a weapon more formidable than the spears and armor her tribe wielded. The tribe made the first move, stepping forward to seize her. Nathan reacted instantaneously, not with brute force which he lacked but with anticipation and precision. He blocked their approach not merely with strength, but with an unyielding refusal to allow harm. Lyra could see the shock ripple through the pursuers. Humans to them were unpredictable. Rationality and protocol dictated that they should be easily overpowered. Yet he defied expectation, a living contradiction, proving that morality and courage could reshape the outcome of confrontation even when every metric suggested defeat. Lyra's heart swelled with a mixture of fear and admiration. She had never believed survival could be chosen rather than enforced, yet here was proof. As the confrontation escalated, she noticed subtle changes in her perception. Every movement Nathan made, every shift in stance, was informed by a human logic she was beginning to comprehend. Anticipation, adaptation, improvisation. He didn't need to outmatch them physically. He only needed to outthink, outlast, and outwill them. He repositioned her slightly, ensuring she was safe yet empowered, signaling without words that she too could act. The realization stunned her. Humans inspire courage in others simply by their refusal to yield. She began to mimic his stance, small adjustments to her footing, subtle movements that prepared her to react, to survive, to participate. For the first time she felt an alliance rather than isolation. Humans, she understood, elevate those around them. Her tribe escalated, their technology humming, weapons primed to subdue. Nathan remained calm, scanning weaknesses, predicting patterns, and responding in microseconds. Lyra marveled at his adaptability. He was not faster, not stronger, not biologically superior. He was human. And that was enough. Every instinct she had was screaming to flee, yet she stood, rooted, learning from him. She understood now why humans were so feared in interstellar narratives. They were unpredictable, resilient, moral, and relentless. A single human with choice could defy generations of training and superior technology. She was witnessing that truth firsthand. As the tension reached its peak, Nathan took action to neutralize the immediate threat. He didn't strike indiscriminately. He used strategy, creating diversions, exploiting gaps in formation, guiding her to safety while ensuring the aggressors were delayed. Lyra followed instinctively, relying on his guidance rather than panic. The tribe, initially confident, began to falter. Their movements became cautious, recalculated, aware that they were facing an anomaly. Lyra's astonishment deepened. Humans are dangerous not because of strength, but because of courage coupled with ingenuity. She had been abandoned by her species, left to die, and yet here she was, witnessing the power of human choice defending her life. Time stretched, every second a test of resolve. The alien leader signaled retreat for the moment, recognizing that a direct confrontation with Nathan was riskier than anticipated. Lyra exhaled, realizing that survival was not guaranteed, but the threat had been contained. She looked at Nathan, bruised and tired but unyielding, and understood a new principle. Humans are not easily broken, not easily swayed, and not easily intimidated. She had been trained to fear, to comply, to expect defeat. Nathan taught her otherwise, silently demonstrating that moral courage, ingenuity, and unyielding loyalty could outweigh numbers, technology, and hierarchy. The tribe withdrew, reassessing the situation, leaving Lyra and the human momentarily unchallenged. In the quiet aftermath, Lyra felt an unfamiliar sensation settle into her chest. Respect, awe, and gratitude intertwined. She had witnessed the essence of humanity distilled: protection without expectation, courage without arrogance, strategy without cruelty. Her species had never provided her with this example. She realized that she was not merely surviving because of his actions. She was learning, absorbing the human philosophy of action, choice, and value. The forest, which had once seemed oppressive and indifferent, now felt like a testament to the difference between species that see life as expendable and species that see life as worth defending, no matter the cost. Nathan tended to her once more, checking for injuries, ensuring she remained safe. He did not lecture, did not boast, did not assume gratitude. His actions spoke for themselves. Lyra understood that humans measure worth differently. Worth was not imposed by rank, status, or expectation. Worth was recognized through action, choice, and unwavering commitment. She had been lifted from death, protected against impossible odds, and inspired to believe in her own value for the first time. Humanity, she realized, was not merely strong, it was extraordinary in the capacity to choose right over convenience, courage over compliance, and compassion over indifference. And she had witnessed it firsthand. The forest had quieted after the brief confrontation, yet tension lingered in every rustling leaf, every distant shadow. Lyra's body ached, but it was no longer from exhaustion alone. Her mind raced, anticipating the inevitable return of her people. They would not give up easily. Punishment was in their blood, obedience their measure of worth. Yet standing beside Nathan, watching the way he exuded unwavering determination despite the odds, she felt an unfamiliar confidence. Humans did not merely survive. They resisted, they protected, and they imposed choice upon a universe that often demanded submission. Nathan's eyes met hers briefly, calm and resolute, silently conveying the same message he had carried since their first encounter. You will not face this alone. And for the first time, Lyra believed it. The sound of approaching movements soon pierced the stillness. Her people had regrouped, returning in greater numbers, their steps deliberate, their weapons calibrated to strike fear and assert dominance. Their leader's glare found her immediately, radiating contempt and disbelief. She had defied them, survived against expectation, and allied herself with a human. That was more than rebellion, it was heresy. Lyra felt the familiar churn of fear in her stomach, the instinctive pull toward flight, but Nathan's hand rested lightly on her arm, steadying her. His presence alone made her hesitation irrelevant. Humans act not because they are stronger, but because they refuse to relinquish what they choose to defend. He had chosen her life. That choice carried weight beyond strength, beyond strategy, beyond fear. The tribe's leader spoke again, voice sharp, demanding her surrender, issuing ultimatums and threats designed to bend her will. She could see the calculations behind his words, the belief that terror and tradition would force her compliance. She had once been conditioned to obey under such circumstances, trained to yield or perish. But now, with Nathan beside her, her perspective had irrevocably shifted. The human's resolve gave her courage. She had witnessed his unwillingness to yield to superior force, his calculated defiance, his moral clarity. In that moment, she realized her survival was not merely a consequence of his intervention. It was a reflection of humanity itself. Humans are not broken by threat. Humans do not bow when confronted with injustice. Humans lift the fallen even when all else demands abandonment. And she, Lyra, was among the fallen. Her tribe advanced, weapons raised, prepared to seize her by force. Nathan did not flinch. He positioned himself in her path, steady, unyielding, an unspoken barrier between her and death. The alien leader's contempt deepened as he realized the human would not step aside. Calculations, predictions, assumptions, all failed in the presence of human moral certainty. Lyra watched, awestruck, as he subtly shifted weight, anticipated angles of attack, and acted with precision not born of brute strength but of ingenuity and determination. She felt an unexpected surge of empowerment. Her species taught her obedience, fear, and submission, yet the human's actions demonstrated an entirely different logic, one that fused courage, intellect, and conscience into an unstoppable force. If humans chose to act even against overwhelming odds, they changed the rules entirely. Lyra's heart pounded as the tribe's initial strike failed to break their formation. Nathan redirected their momentum, using the environment, his anticipation, and tactical foresight to stall, redirect, and protect. Each move was deliberate. Each choice reinforced the lesson she had learned over the past hours. Humans act for principles, not advantage. Her people were relentless, but they were predictable. Nathan was unpredictable. He was guided by something intangible, something no hierarchy or protocol could suppress: moral courage. Lyra understood then that she had witnessed a force her people had never truly accounted for. Humanity was not measured in muscle, speed, or lineage, it was measured in the refusal to abandon life, in the willingness to endure for the sake of another, in the defiance of injustice even when the cost was personal. The alien leader's strategy faltered as he realized his expectations were flawed. Humans do not respond to fear in the ways her people anticipated. Nathan's defense was not reactive, it was proactive. He protected, guided, and maintained control of the situation without resorting to intimidation or cruelty. Lyra, inspired by his example, began to move with him, small adjustments that mirrored his calm vigilance, subtle steps that demonstrated awareness and alignment. She had been trained to obey, to anticipate, and to endure, yet she had never been allowed to choose how to act, to claim agency in survival. Now she could. And she did. Standing beside him, she was no longer merely the weak or the abandoned. She was active, participating in her own rescue, validated by the human's unwavering commitment. The confrontation reached its climax when the tribe's leader, frustrated and unaccustomed to defiance, raised a weapon in a final, commanding gesture. Lyra stepped forward, not because she was fearless but because she had learned the power of choice. She raised her head, her voice steady despite the quiver she felt, and declared that she would not return. The words carried more than defiance. They carried recognition of the value she had discovered in her life, a value independent of her species' judgment. Nathan remained at her side, silent but steadfast, reinforcing her declaration without needing to speak. His presence, his example, had taught her the courage to claim her own life, to reject submission and to defy oppression. Her tribe recoiled, uncertain, unprepared for this display of human-inspired conviction. Their calculations had assumed fear, compliance, and negotiation. They did not anticipate the combination of human ingenuity and moral certainty paired with Lyra's own awakening. The leader's glare hardened, but recognition flickered beneath it. The human was not a mere obstacle. He was a force that altered the dynamics entirely, a singular life capable of defying entire systems of control. Lyra understood the moment's significance. Her survival was no longer dependent solely on physical protection. It was now a testament to the indomitable principle she had observed. Humans lift the fallen, defend the helpless, and act when others hesitate. Humanity itself had extended its strength through him. The tribe, sensing the futility of immediate action, withdrew, leaving behind only the faint echo of authority and the certainty that the encounter would be reported. Lyra exhaled slowly, absorbing the profound reality. She had been saved, defended, and empowered. Not because she had earned it, not because she had proven her worth according to rigid measures, but because humans chose to act in accordance with conscience. Nathan's unwavering loyalty, courage, and clarity had transformed her perception of life, survival, and value. She had been abandoned, left to die, and yet in the human's decision to intervene, she found not only life but validation, trust, and a new understanding of strength. Her body ached, her mind reeled, but the exhaustion was tempered by awe and gratitude. Nathan checked her injuries once more, ensuring she was unharmed, providing guidance without demand, care without expectation. She realized that human protection was not conditional. It was not measured by achievement, obedience, or usefulness. It was an assertion of moral clarity. Life matters because it exists. Lyra's species had never offered her this. Her people measured strength by compliance, survival by conquest, value by contribution. Humans measured it by choice. And she had been chosen. In the quiet that followed, Lyra allowed herself to fully absorb the lesson. She had survived not because of inherent advantage or status, but because a human recognized her value. She had learned that courage, ingenuity, and moral resolve could overcome fear, power, and expectation. She had discovered that protection and loyalty were not abstract principles, but living, breathing acts performed by those who choose to see the worth in others. And most importantly, she had realized that she, once abandoned and deemed unworthy, could now claim her own life and her own destiny. Her gratitude was ineffable, flowing quietly within her as a recognition of human greatness and her own awakening. Nathan did not require words of thanks. His actions had spoken enough. Yet Lyra spoke anyway, softly, trembling with the weight of comprehension and emotion. "Thank you, for lifting me when no one else would." The words were simple, yet profound, encapsulating the journey from abandonment to trust, from fear to empowerment, from despair to hope. They were not a plea. They were a declaration. She had been seen, valued, and chosen. And in that moment, as she stood beside the human who had redefined her understanding of survival and worth, she understood a universal truth she would carry forever. Humans do not abandon the fallen. They lift them. They defend them. They choose them. And through that choice they transform not only the lives they save, but the very meaning of courage, hope, and strength. Lyra, once abandoned in the dirt, now stood fully alive, fully seen, and fully awakened to the extraordinary force that was humanity. Her tribe had failed her. The wilderness had tested her. But a human had chosen her. And that choice had made all the difference.